Toronto, Canada. Previously, Ray had stated that he did not return to Atlanta.
Ray is his own worst enemy by varying his stories. And he told me he did not return to Atlanta the next day after the assassination.
Where did he say he went?
Didn't say.
They weren't looking for a conspiracy. And that leads us to the question of Arthur Murtaugh. Arthur Murtaugh was an FBI agent in good standing. He retired after about 20 years in the Bureau, became a practicing lawyer in upstate New York. And he said, I was involved in the assassination investigation. I saw what happened. The FBI wasn't even looking for a conspiracy. He said the FBI systematically washed out conspiracy leads that would have pointed toward the right wing. And Arthur Murtaugh talked about something else. He said, on the day of the assassination, he watched as a supervisor in the Atlanta FBI office, at hearing the news that King had been shot, began jumping up and down in glee. They finally shot the son of a bitch. They finally shot Zorro. Zorro was the FBI's code name for Martin Luther King.
So you have to say that FBI was inept too from the very beginning in the matter, at the very least. Yes, I've always been very suspicious of the whole business.
There was a gun that was used, however, it was found outside the rooming house from which the shots were allegedly fired, and it's found with a pile of other items traceable to James Earl Ray in a blanket left outside Knipes Amusement House.
Why leave a whole package of evidence behind to trace you directly to the trial? A gun that you've bought, and have a record of its purchase in a store, a prison radio. I mean, things were there that belonged to Ray, but there were clothes that wouldn't have fit him, and it's just a ridiculous thing for somebody who's actually committing a crime to do, to leave this whole package of evidence like a Christmas present behind for the Memphis police and the FBI to eventually link back to his name.
It's my belief that rather than indicating Ray's guilt, that indicates the contrary, because I cannot think of anyone who would be stupid enough to leave the evidence against him on the street outside of the rooming house in which he was only shortly before the assassination.
They never conducted, at that time, the most sophisticated test in the state of the art at that time was a spectrographic analysis test. The FBI didn't conduct that test. They could actually have conducted such a test and take the fragments from Dr. King's neck, conducted a test, and linked it with the rifle. They did not do that. Mr. Fraser testified, yes, the bullets found in the bundle was consistent with the fragments of Dr. King's neck. Not conclusive, but you see, that type of reasoning is, sure, that it would be also consistent with ammunition manufactured before and years after. I mean, it was no evidence at all. There was no ballistic evidence that could link that rifle with Dr. King's.
There are many other indications that Ray, especially in the situation in Toronto, had connections with U.S. intelligence in terms of how he was being moved and manipulated, and did things that were well beyond his capability. For instance, he used aliases of 3 different people who lived near each other in Toronto who looked exactly like him almost. One to the extent that he had the same facial scars and wounds. Could he go to a phone book and pick out people that lived so close to each other randomly? It just made no sense.
Ray, traveling under one of his Toronto aliases, Raymond Snade, made his escape to London, England, where it seems that he lost his contact and reverted to his bungling ways and was finally apprehended by Scotland Yard at Heathrow International Airport. Ray was trying to escape to Rhodesia at the time the U.S. government was faced with a curious dilemma in the extradition of James Earl Ray. To win custody, American authorities must first produce evidence sufficient to warrant trial under British law. It is interesting to note that the U.S. sought extradition of James Earl Ray on conspiracy charges to the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King.
The Justice Department initially filed a charge against James Earl Ray in Birmingham, in federal court in Birmingham, alleging that he had been part of a conspiracy to assassinate Dr. King. Years later, when Bud Fensterwald and I represented Ray, we filed a motion asking that he be brought to trial on that charge, hoping that we could smoke the government out. Instead, the government simply moved to dismiss the charge, and the charge was dropped.
So all of these things are suspicious things. James Earl Ray being caught and then put in a special cell where he claims he was sick. I remember that on the front pages of the paper, his petitioning the judge to change some of the lights, to change his conditions because he was getting sick. Then a well-known defense lawyer in the country coming into the state of Tennessee and claiming, James Earl Ray, you will be executed if you do not plead guilty. There had been no executions in the state of Tennessee by that time for at least 16 years.
In 1969, as the new trial date neared, Ray says that Foreman began to coerce him into pleading guilty, began to pressure him to plead guilty, and ultimately threatened that if he did not plead guilty, that Foreman would withdraw from the case and allow Ray to go to trial with the public defender. Ray thought that that would be absolutely disastrous because he knew that public defenders did not have a very good reputation, did not have the skills, resources, or experience to do the kind of job his case required. So he reasoned that it would be better to plead guilty and then tried to overturn the guilty plea rather than to go to trial with a public defender.
Although Ray had pleaded guilty at an earlier hearing, he interrupts his attorney, Foreman, when Foreman maintains to the court that there was no conspiracy. Ray later states, "I was a setup and sucked in. I bought the rifle that was found on the sidewalk after the murder, but I did not fire at King or anybody else."
Over time, with the release of the documents and with careful study of the volumes, the critics have found that this was almost as flawed an investigation as the original Warren Commission work had been in the John F. Kennedy case, and there were no real efforts to determine anything except a rather vague implication that Ray might have been involved with some conspiracy where someone was putting up money to have King killed, and feeling that he could cash in, he went to be the lone assassin.
That investigation was a complete sham. The FBI, certain FBI officials were happy that King was dead, and they didn't give a damn who had killed him. And that's why the real villain here isn't the FBI. They were known to hate civil rights activists, peace activists. They were a weapon against the progressive movement in this country in the broadest sense for 50 years under J. Edgar Hoover. That's a given. The real villains here, in my view, are the media and the Democratic Party and the members of Congress. In April 1968, when Martin Luther King was killed, not one of them spoke out and said, wait a second. Given what the FBI did to Martin Luther King in the last 5 years of his life, we can't let them head the investigation. We need some independent body. We need a special prosecutor, or we need to set up a special committee of Congress to watchdog the FBI's investigation. Or something's got to be done, but we can't let an agency that had made Martin Luther King public enemy #1, we can't let that agency be the investigators of who killed King. That would be criminal. And where was the U.S. Congress? Because the U.S. Congress knew damn well what the FBI had done to King during King's life, and they didn't lift a finger. They were intimidated and afraid of J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI czar.